Welcome to TGIF.
Today we're going to talk about emotions and feelings.
My favorite thing.
Who wants to talk about those? But I think we can agree that each and every one of us have a feeling that we never want to feel.
Yeah, that's true.
And it is very clear that this is what is happening today in our piece of scripture as we move through Judges. And it is that feeling of being...
Takes us to the word of the day, which is rejected.
I don't want to feel rejected.
I don't either.
And there's a lot that goes with that. And people today, there's so many people, and at times I have felt rejected. I think we can all go back and identify with that. But it's important that we remember that we don't have to stay there when we get there. And our scripture today is just another good example of how, even though this is way back in ancient times, we can glean so much today.
It's amazing, too, how sometimes things never really do change. We think that everything changes, but this is one of those things that it doesn't change from the very moment in the garden. I mean, that idea of Adam and Eve and their understanding of being included or rejected and the complexity of it. And that carries on here. So in Judges chapter 11, verse 7, but Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "Are you not the very ones who rejected me and drove me out of my father's house? So why do you come to me now when you are in trouble?" Ooh, man, they have just been caught. The leaders of Gilead have been caught because they're the very ones that sent Jephthah away and rejected him. And so now they need help. And he is a mighty warrior. He has proven himself to take on mighty armies and defeat them. And so what better thing when you're feeling the pressure of other armies? Let's go find a really good mighty warrior out there. And so it's interesting, though, because the next line is their response to Jephthah. And their answer to him is so sad because they just jump in this way. They say, "Nevertheless," and they just move on.
Right.
There's no acknowledgement that they treated him poorly. There's no acknowledgement that they were not fair to him, that it's unjust situation. There's no humility when they come to him. And I think that's the really hard part, because when somebody is rejected, there's a hurt. There's a deep, deep wound there. And as Christians, we have to figure out how to navigate some of that. And it's hard.
Because the doors of the church should always be open. And we know we've experienced people coming in off the streets and obviously with a lot to their story. And how quick are we to engage that person? Because they're probably in a place of that rejection from a lot of society, and a lot of times their family. How many times do we see someone that comes through and they don't really have anyone? Or how many times do people contact or stop by the church office? They have no one. And that feeling of rejection, and you come into a place with Christians, they should feel they have purpose.
Yeah, God's calling on people's life cannot be defined by their circumstances that we first engage them in. Because so many times, and we see it over and over in the Bible, Jesus going out there and finding the person that just doesn't fit in and calling them, and yet we see them go on to really be a critical part of the kingdom of God. So it's that idea, son of a prostitute, I mean, that's who he is. So he was born to a prostitute, and so the people already put the judgment, already put him in a box and said, "You'll never amount to anything." Could anything good come from Nazareth? Could anything good, I mean, we do that. Could anything good come from a person that was raised that way or this way? We do it all the time, and maybe sometimes not intentional. You know, even Christians will try to, acknowledge, but yet we fall into this kind of trap. And so Jephthah, not the ideal judge, for sure. He wasn't the ideal judge, but at times he was so devoted to God and leading the people in such a good direction. But we have to remember, he's scarred, he's hurt, he's damaged. So some of those insecurities, doubts, they fester up. I mean, we all do that. These little doubts of insecurity fester up, and that usually leads him to manipulate a situation, and that's where the problem happens. happens as he starts manipulating her.
And I think you just described so many of us at different times in our life. We have those times when we're on fire for God. We're devoted, we're in the Word, we're doing good things, and then something shifts in maybe our life circumstance, and just that struggle for power or to be recognized or to be noticed or to feel significant. We all can confess to a little bit manipulative, intentionally. No, but it's just the brokenness of human nature that we do that. So we can't put ourselves above that. And then when we live in this world of so many people that struggle with that, and you think of people that were abused as a child or part of, within drug use and the sex trafficking, and the list goes on, how do they continue to move and grow forward? By the grace of God, they can, but those scars are just that, scars. And as Christians, we're called to come alongside those people and to love them.
I think that's what's hard, because even when you see like a celebrity or a leader rise to power, it seems like they're doing all the right things, right? Then somehow they just go off the rails and they end up, in whether it's drug rehab or alcohol rehab or some kind of rehab, but it still stems back to their dysfunction of being rejected somewhere along the line, and them seeking this power, which gave them some good techniques to rise to power or have that music ability, but then ultimately they get to questioning. You see somebody come to, finally has the corner office, has all the dream come true, and then what happens? They go out and kill themselves or do something, that's just so tragic.
As the disciple of Jesus, we have a great calling on our life each and every day, in our workplace, in our family, where we go to school, all of these places, that we are to not fall into that temptation of judging, we're in the book of Judges, and not falling into just the brokenness of the world, but rather to lift people up, to not just say, well, nevertheless, here's what I need. Sorry, you've had a bad life. Sorry this happened, but we need to do this, this, and this, kind of like they were doing. Not having that humility to just kind of give space and grace and just say, wow, your story is hard.
I like that a lot, where you say creating space and grace, because ultimately this is stuff they have to work through. And if they don't have a safe place, we talk about having a safe place at church where people know that it's safe because they're loved by God, they will not be rejected by God, and it's space for them to work out some of the dysfunction. And there's so much other layers. I mean, we could talk mental illness, we could talk, drug and alcohol and all that, but it's just, let's take a moment just to recognize that we're not that good as Christians of creating spaces of grace to allow, whether it's a professional, to come in and try to do some work, or whether it's just, figuring out how to pray through some terrible, ugly stuff.
Because mental health, as we know, it doesn't take much to know that it is just on the rise. And so much stems from, circumstances with and without of people's control, obviously, but it's just that the pressures of the world, the pressures of society, and a culture that just makes it think we have to be all this, this, and this. That's what we're supposed to do, versus just being a child of God, loving people every day in their brokenness, in their success, whatever it is, and growing and continually developing that relationship with God. Just like sometimes he was on, following God, and sometimes he was off. Y'all, we do the same thing.
And it's important to have good, healthy people around you. And so when somebody is in that place, that's why the space for grace is so important, because having good, healthy people around you to encourage you, to help you to work through it, is so important.
So our question that we send you with this week: how can you make space for a rejected person? And you might be thinking, well, my friends, everyone's good, everyone's doing good. That might be the surface that you see, but there are people that are struggling so deep inside. And maybe, we're in the Christmas season, depending if you're watching this real time with us, But how do you look for those people that have been suppressing that feeling of rejection or hurt or not good enough? How do you make space and love them where they are? Affirm they are a child of God with a gift and purpose for their life given specifically to them by God.
I mean, and just because we're in this season doesn't mean, I think all throughout the year, there's lonely people.
Oh, absolutely.
We are in a world of lonely people. They may be on Facebook, they may be connecting through the media that way, but they're still very lonely. And that's what we've got to try to figure out how to sift through and get through.
So make it a great week, and we will see you next time on TGIF. Bye.
Bye.